We're on an angle. Oh dear. I don't know how to fix that on this tripod. I'm going to fix that in post. Hey book friends and potential book enemies. Let's talk about books. I'm standing in the corner today because honestly my back hurts. That's it. I need to stand and not sit at my chair. But also, even though I've kind of thought about what I want to say to you, I've not pulled any books off the shelf. So this is the vibe today. It's also making me think, like, the books just stop here on my bookshelf. I need like another layer, right? I really want some Billies. I know that they're so passé and cliche, but Billies would work really nice in this space. And they would go higher, except where we talk here in my office, there is a steel beam that I can touch that runs the length of the house and supports the second floor. And so I can't fit a full-size Billy bookshelf in here. And also, like, you can see that's cupboards. And technically I need to be able to reach into those, although they're entirely blocked off because my cats know how to open those doors, and that's annoying. I can't tell you how many times we've got up in the middle of the night to yoink cats out of the cupboards in our bedroom, despite the fact that we do our best to childproof them. That's a different story. I'm on a tangent already. We are talking today the mid-year book Freakout, whatever it's called, mid-year reading catch-up. I've tried to do this every year for the past couple of years, and I am filming this in July, even though it will come out in August. I'm almost on deadline. It's been a year. Let's say that. Anyway, we're analog today. No, we're not. We're phone, and we are bullet journal. The phone is mainly so that I can look up what I said last year, and compare notes. All right. This, according to my notes from last year, comes from the original video was by a YouTuber called El Grey Books, who is no longer on YouTube. So I don't know if the video is still up, but it's basically a list of things that I have read this year, that I'm intending to read this year, how am I feeling about reading goals this year, and an excuse to say hello. I'm also rushing because I'm on a deadline. I do have to go to my job, but we'll see how that goes. Right, I feel like I'm conducting something. The bullet journal is heavy. Let's put that down. Right, the first question on this list is always best book you've read so far. Now, last year, should we go last year first or this year first and then compare to last year? Let's go this year first. This year, the best books that I've read so far, according to my bullet journal, are The City and the City by China Mieville. That book blew my mind. I love, even though it's a classic, like it's a classic for a reason, and it is, I'll link my review, which was so vague because I find it really difficult to talk about things that I enjoyed. I find it really easy to be critical of things. Is that my degree training? Maybe. But to be effusive in praise doesn't come naturally to me. Let's get it off the shelf. The City and the City is the story of a detective trying to solve a murder, but there's a complication because there's two cities, the city and the city, and they are both in the same physical space but divided up between two city states, and you can't literally see the other city. How am I trying to say that? You have to unsee if you've accidentally seen the other city, whether that's a car on the road or the train that goes past our detective Pauli's house, or a murder. But the problem is that this murder happened cross-border. So Paulie has to investigate the murder in his city and also the other city. And I love that concept. It's so dystopian. And of course it's a detective mystery, which I love, and you will see in other videos that I'm going to talk about when I film them that I've been on a detective kick this year. So love that. That blew my mind, and it is one of the best books I've read this year, and I don't think that will change. I think it will be in my top 2 with this other one by the end of the year. The other book I loved, and will come to no surprise to anyone who knew me as a teenager, is That's My Mum. John and Paul, A Love Story in Songs. I was so obsessed with the Beatles when I was a teenager. When I was about 13 or 14, the Beatles Anthology TV series came out in Australia and probably worldwide. It would have been a huge event. And I taped that shit off the TV and I watched it and I watched it and I got all the albums. Mum bought me, not a box set, but you know, like a case with every Beatles CD released, including the singles, including the number ones. I had all the CDs from the anthology. Like I was a mad keen Beatles fan. I'm looking around to see if I can see that box with the Beatles CDs. It's over there on my shelf. I still have it. So when people were saying good things about this Beatles book, because of course Beatles are a cultural institution, there's been thousands of books. When people were saying good things about this one, I bought it as soon as it came out and I read it as soon as I bought it and I loved it and I sang along to the songs. There's a Spotify playlist because I haven't reviewed this one yet. The songs, each chapter is one of their songs. So chapter 4, Will You Love Me Tomorrow? And through each of those songs explores the relationship between John Lennon and Paul McCartney in particular. So I sang along, I cried, I laughed. I was very grateful to many mascara companies that make waterproof mascara because when I was crying on my lunch break and then had to go back to work, I could do that without fixing my face. This 5 stars. And is that because I have an emotional attachment to the band? Absolutely. Was it a good book? Yes, it was. It would very likely be a 4-star read for anyone not obsessed. Let's get my phone and see what I said last year. I said the best book that I had read by July was Shirley Jackson's We've Always Lived in the Castle. I stand by that. That was a great book. And I said Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie, which I also stand by because, again, that was a science fiction that blew my mind and is a classic for a reason. And if you're interested in sci-fi doing good, different things, would still recommend. Question 2 is best sequel. I'm going to cheat a bit on this one because I haven't read, well, by the start of July, I hadn't read many sequels. But I did read, not this copy, but I own this copy, A Badham's Gate by James S.A. Corey. This is book 3 in The Expanse, and I've been slowly buddy reading these for some people on Storygraph, and I love it. And, you know, any excuse to read The Expanse. In fact, it's probably time for number 4. We will see, because I just bought so many books, I can't in my head justify going back to a reread before I at least tackle some of that pile. But The Expanse is something I'll always come back to. I always love. All the books I think are strong except the next one, but even it has its place in the world, which is a reread. I make that abundantly clear. But a real sequel that was new to me was this one, Brandon Sanderson's Wind and Truth, which is huge. And I finished that in January, so it counts as this year. It is book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, and they are all as big as this. And at this point, I have learned just to trust the process with Brandon Sanderson. This book is heavy. Trust the process with Brandon Sanderson because it does feel like nothing is happening until about 70%, and then everything happens. And it's also the wrap up of an arc. Like, this is a place where you can stop and you never have to come back to Stormlight, and there's a resolution. I did, at the end of my review, was fuck you, Brandon Sanderson, because it was so good, because it did build up for what the hell is going to happen next. But also it's going to be years before we find out what happened next. And you know what? I'm okay with that because they're long books, and for the most part, you're going along thinking, I'm going to have to just trust that everything you're telling me will make sense at the end, because right now I'm a little bit bored. But that's Brandon Sanderson in general. What did we say last year? We said, oh, there was lots. I had a Murderbot book, Becky Chambers, Lois McMaster Bujold in the Penrick and Desdemona series, and Adrian Tchaikovsky, Andrzej Sapkowski, which is The Witcher, Brother Cadfael book, and another Lois McMaster Bujold in a different series. I had lots to say last year. I would have lots to say this year if we filmed this video today, but I'm backdating it to like the end of June. Number 3 is your most anticipated new release. Now, obviously I don't have those books with me. The first one is not a new release, but it's not out in paperback yet, and there's no way I'm buying it in hardcover. and that is called The Haunted Wood, A History of Childhood Reading by Sam Leith. This just sounds amazing. It's about the stories that we read as children and tell to children and the history of that. Like, it sounds amazing and I really want it. And actually I haven't looked to see if it's in paperback yet, but it should be by the end of this year. And I will be buying it. I'm very excited. And one that is forthcoming this year, I think in August, but again, I'm not sure because it will be hardcover first, is called Folklore, A Journey Through the Past and Present. This is by Sarah Holbrook and Owen Davies, both of whom I think live on this shelf. There's definitely Owen Davies here in my 133s, which is Witchcraft and Magic. This one, as it says, is a guide to folklore. Folklore is something that I did as part of my honours degree in terms of fairies. In particular, that was relevant to my honours on magic. Honestly, it's just right up my alley and I'm so excited for it. Last year, the new releases that I hadn't read yet but wanted to was Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I have here. It's in my to be filmed pile, so I have read that one. We also had The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper, which is here. I read this on Kindle and then my mum gifted me a physical copy. Thank you, Mum. It's amazing. And then the last one I had here was Stephen Mithen's The Language Puzzle, How We Talked Our Way Out of the Stone Age. Now, I started listening to that on audio, didn't vibe with some of the historical basis that he was working off in terms of Neanderthals and language development. And so I DNF'd that one. Question number 4 is your most anticipated read or most anticipated release. I'm going off the top of my head here. My most anticipated release for the rest of 2025 is another Olga Tokarczuk. She's got a book coming in English in September called House of Days, House of Nights, I think. That was an instant pre-order as soon as I learned about it, and I'm so excited. It's going to be a book in the vein of Flight, so interconnected short stories, but in terms of theme, if not character. And even though I didn't love Flights as much as some of her other books, she's an instant pre-order for me for now. My most anticipated releases for 2024 was Olga Tokarczuk again, The Impusium. Now, I didn't film this because I didn't film anything for about 3 months last year. Oh, what's this? This is the receipt. Cool. I didn't film anything for about 3 months last year after I finished Ulysses because I couldn't. I just couldn't. But The Impusium, it came out when I was on holiday, and so I went to the bookshop and bought it the day it went on the shelf. And so that was exciting because I don't live close to a bookshop store. And then I read it on holiday. So I've got holiday memories. This is a retelling of The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, which I did also read and not review last year. And it was not what I was expecting, but I'm going to reread this actually because I feel like it deserves a second go to enjoy this story for what it is and not what it wasn't in terms of The Magic Mountain. Does that make sense? I also was excited about Wind and Truth, which we talked about already. I was excited about The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. That's this one. This is a new series for them called The Captives' War. Again, I read it in September and haven't reviewed it. I would like to do a catch-up review video, even though it's been a year for some of these books. This one didn't hit as hard as The Expanse, but it was definitely their voice, their style. I enjoyed it, and I will read the second one, but it's not instant love like The Expanse. It was perfectly cromulent. And the final one from last year I was looking forward to was a short story, Penric and the Bandit by Lois McMaster Bujold. Again, that's in the Penric and Desdemona series. That was fine. Just a continuing installation of this series, which now that the number 14 just came out last week or the week before, it's beginning to feel overextended, and some installments are more interesting than others. They all rate 3.5 to 4 stars for me, and I'd say this one was on the 3.5 end. It's just a little adventure, and you hope, but I'm pretty sure that Penric will always survive it. So that It's more about how do you get out of this sticky situation rather than will you survive the sticky situation. Question 5 is biggest disappointment of the year so far. I'm going to go back through this stack and tell you that it was Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky is so hit and miss for me. Some series I love, some I DNF, and this one I read it and I will do a more in-depth review, but it just fell a bit flat for me. That's all I'm going to say. Last year, biggest disappointment was The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor, which I read on Kindle. And I wanted that to be a first contact book. And instead it was it was less about the race that they were having first contact with and more about their reaction and just the state of the world while this other species was evolving. And clearly I did talk about this because I've got a link here, so I will link that, but I didn't enjoy it. Having said that, I didn't hate it, it just didn't meet the expectation that I had for it. And so I am interested to read Ray Naylor's new work, which has been out for a couple of months now, called Where the Axe is Buried. But again, that's something that I might pick up when it's on like a cheap Kindle deal rather than buy the full price book. Question 6 is your biggest reading surprise so far. Now that one, digging back through the pile, is John and Paul. I wasn't expecting to love this book. I was expecting it to be fine, and I was surprised at how much it moved me. I was surprised by the depth of the detail. There were things that I learned, which is nice because while I was an obsessive teenager, I wasn't like digging into every fact and memorizing. I'm not that obsessed, just like 75%. So that was really good, but just in terms of the coherence of the story, this referred a lot to the documentary Get Back, which I just watched. So there was more recent things that it referred to as well, and I was just surprised at how good it was given the hype and also my general curmudgeonliness about things that I enjoy, but also I don't like being part of the fandom because fandom is cringe and I hate it. Last year, my biggest surprise was We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I will link my review if, it'll be somewhere, because it blew me away by how good it was. And I was surprised that it hadn't been put in front of me earlier and somebody said, read this because it's amazing. Because read it. It is amazing. Question 7 is your new favorite author. Now, this is not an author that is new to me because I read some of their works before. But I have been devouring Agatha Christie's Poirot. Poirot in book form is new to me. And as you can see, I'm loving it. I'm loving it, and you can see why Christie sells so well even today, because not all of these books are winners, but most of them that I've read so far are winners, and I'm having a grand old time. In fact, I've had to switch out from Poirot to something else just to pace myself because I can't be spending $20 a pop on these tiny books and, still afford my rent. Having said that, lots of them are available on Amazon Kindle, and also they're tiny in comparison to things that I usually read. So by this stage, I'm hitting my reading goals, which we'll talk about. Last year, my new to me favorite author was Jennifer Croft, The Extinction of Irina Ray, which I read last year and loved. I reread this year, still loved, and I eagerly await the next thing that she publishes. I already answered this question. Book that made me cry. Dig John and Paul back out of the pile. Nobody was surprised. But also The Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy. This is volume 1. I'll link my review because I just reviewed it. There's an interlude in here in particular with Old Jolyon. The interlude's called Indian Summer of a Forsyte. Basically, Old Jolyon, who is one of the patriarchs of the Forsyte family when the book begins, is elderly and then passes away. And it's the last couple of weeks of his life that he spends with Irene, who's like the pivot character of this book, and just how lovely it has been for him to have a bit of excitement and companionship at the end of his life at his home. And so that he dies alone, but Irene is there. Like she comes up on his body as he's dead, like just dead. And that made me cry because I like old Julian. Last year, the book that made me cry and will always make me cry is The Lions of Al-Rassan by Guy Gabriel Kay. That's this one. I will link reviews. I've read it many times and I'm sure I've talked about it a couple of times. This is magical realism, historical fiction set in Al-Andalus, which is Muslim Spain in, I want to say, in the 13th, 12th century. It's not... Oh, my battery's run out. Right. As I was saying, it's not a one-to-one relationship between actual Spain and Al-Andalus. There's different religions, different world properties, blah, blah, blah. There's magic. But it's close enough that you can recognize historical figures and historical events and basically just think of it as historical fiction. I love this book so much, and it is standalone. So if you want to dip your toe into Guy Gabriel Kay, start here. It's great. Hello. I'm editing this video and realize I completely skipped a question. Question 9, a book that made you happy. Luckily, right next to me is a book that made me happy, and that is Heresy, the Jesus Christ and Other Sons of God by Catherine Nixie. This made me happy because it was interesting. It was full of things that I didn't know before. But also the tone was just written in such a delightful manner. It was witty and funny and clever and not at all, well, judgy, but in a humorous way. Not in a, I can't believe people thought this, or I can't believe people made this up. But in terms of this is irony, or even at the time it would be considered absurd. Kind of judgy. And I appreciate that. So Heresy is the book that made me happy. Now, last year, the book that made me happy will be like behind that bookshelf is Little History of Literature by David Sutherland. I'm going to look that up. John Sutherland. That one was great. The Little History series is great. I actually would like to have more. It's just a matter of finding them and buying them and finding time to, you know, all the excuses. But A Little History of Literature made me happy because it is bite-sized chunks, small chapters spanning the breadth of mainly European literature written in English. The history of books just really makes me happy, as you guys know if you spent time here. And now back to what I filmed last weekend. Next one is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. I don't have that many. Got Between Two Rivers, which I bought because cover. I bought because the insides sounded good, but the cover is what caught my attention in the first place. I think we just like a little bit of foiling, don't we? Love a foiling moment. So there's that one. I haven't talked about this. Last year, I put Olga Tokarczuk's The Lost Soul. This one, which is ostensibly a children's picture book. There's a second one like this that just came out, but they are so expensive, so I'm going to wait until a time when I need to treat myself. These have gorgeous insides. So beautiful. And I also said Kafka's Metamorphosis because this is a mini cloth-bound classic. And I think the only cloth-bound that I own, I've been really reluctant to start collecting them for two reasons. One, once you start, you have to keep going, and I don't love all the covers. And two, they're expensive. And three, sometimes these are penguins. Sometimes I don't want the penguin edition of things, especially in terms of translated work. So this is the only one I have so far. Okay, last question. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I would like to read. None of it's a need, it's a hobby. But I would like to have read The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk. Are we sensing a theme? My goodness. This one is hefty. It is my intended book for a big book challenge that one of my book clubs is reading, where it's to take the big book that you've been hesitating to begin and read it before the end of the year. So that gives me 5 months at this point. I can manage that. I talked about this book in my recent Melbourne reading vlog where I picked it up, and I bought the physical edition to prompt me to start, because I will feel bad about not even starting now that I have this version. I have it on Kindle. It was a daily deal yonks ago. That's the goal, is to start that. My problem is this is a daytime reading, concentrating book, not a nighttime book, because my bedtime book can't be that deep. It can't be that intense that I need a lot of processing power, because I'm reading this in the 15 to 40 minutes it takes me to fall asleep, depending on how interesting the book is. This one needs to be daytime reading. So I have to slot that into the physical book reading time, which is limited because everything. You get it. So I'm going to try and start. When I finish the book that I'm currently reading, I'm going to start this one. I'm going to try. Let's say that. Last year, I had a list of things that I needed to finish by the end of the year. One was Wind and Truth, which we talked about. I read. One was Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, which I read. That was a buddy read, and it was a great buddy read. Highly recommend reading classics in a buddy read. I needed to read The Impusium, which I read. I wanted to read Jane Eyre, which again was a classics buddy read. Highly recommend. Got through that. And Andrzej Sapkowski's The Lady of the Lake, which is in the Witcher series. This is the last Witcher book, and then there's another short story, and another one's been announced. So, I mean, it's not the last, but it's the last in the arc of the story, I believe. What are you? I just pulled the bookmark out of where I was. Oh, man. Not that it matters, because I DNF'd this thing. I couldn't get behind it. I couldn't get behind it for 2 reasons. One is a major spoiler, but brings realism into this fantasy series that I don't want. I hate. My brain is rebelling against it. If you've read this book, we can talk about that. And the other thing was that there's story told in retrospect, in flashback, but it is told like Geralt and his pals are in the pub and someone comes up to them and refers to the events of the past. Then the next paragraph is those events of the past in present tense. And that is hard. It's not impossible. Obviously, I have the skills to read a book, but it's more work to put into the book that I was finding frustrating with the small amounts of time that I have to read a book. If I could sit down with this for 2 hours, which I would never do, I can't sit still for that long, but if I could and really get into the meat of it, yes, it would be fine. And then the other realist story that is going on, I could tolerate, but because I didn't have the opportunity to give it that chance, I hated it and I DNF'd it. But I still want to have read it, therefore it is still on my list of I should pick that up, but it has not happened. I let that one go. So that's the books. I have so many sketchy looking piles going on now. Let's bring up Storygraph here on my phone and look where I am at with my reading goals. Currently I'm on track, but that's because I have like mainlined all that short Poirot, and that got me ahead again. I was behind for a while, and that's because I've just spent long stretches of this year not reading, because it happens that way sometimes. As of today, I have read 32 books, which is on track. It's taking me 16 days to read a book. I am almost at a quarter of my reads being non-fiction. It's a little bit under, and that's just because non-fiction takes longer to read, and this year I have been listening to it. I don't have much listening time these days. Most of my books have been digital, which might be indicative of how I'm reading, how I'm feeling about reading, is that it's easier to read those easy books at bedtime rather than sit down after work and not scroll Instagram, because that is the path of least resistance. We'll get back to reading. It's fine. I'm not worried. My average rating this year is 3.77 and I have 2 5 stars. Can you guess what they are? Are they Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead and John and Paul? Yes. Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead, Olga Tokarczuk. That is my tag. Tag yourself if you want to do one of these. Tag me if you do it so that I can see. I made this video specifically for Kelly of Curatorially Yours, but I'm glad that you are here too. And I will be back soon for another video. I'm still catching up my reading of this year, and we could maybe have a vlog sometime. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Shall we take some of those and try and film a thumbnail?